2020, the watch industry is going through quite the turmoil right now, but I am seeing a trend in the last few years, and today we're going to be talking about it. It is vintage reissues, many different brands from entry-level luxury all the way to the Holy Trinity. Everyone's getting on board with this. What's going on, guys? My name is Anthony, and this is Watch With Me. As I said, we're going to be talking about vintage reissue watches. I'm a big fan. I want to know what you guys think about it. Before we get into that, of course, a wristwatch check. And today I am wearing my Breitling Navitimer. This is an 806. This is not the reissue, but this is from 1960. Fun fact about the Breitling Navitimer, originally came out in 1952 and it's never stopped production, leaving it the oldest and longest running chronograph still in production today. Fun fact. Enough of my watch, let's get into the topic. So for many years, one of the main factors that really influenced the watch industry was kind of auction prices. You mix that now with social media, and it is a no-brainer that vintage watches and reissues have been quite popular in the last few years. I would say vintage watches really gotten popular through the likes of Hodinkee. Really, watch connoisseurs really collecting more of the more desirable pieces from the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s pieces. But now we're starting to see that translate into mainstream watch brands, and they're starting to recreate these designs that they have very rich history of. Now, I've always been a fan of vintage Breitlings, and I've even gone on the record and said I think vintage Breitlings are some of the best buys and best designs in the vintage segment. But before we get into Breitling at all, we're going to be talking about Longines. Now, I think Longines has done a great job. They've even introduced that whole heritage line dating back to vintage pieces that they've made in the past. Now, although I'm not necessarily a big fan of what Longines is doing today on their modern day pieces, but their heritage line is unbelievable. And their vintage pieces, some of the most collectible vintage pieces on the market. You can go and watch many different Hodinkee videos on Talking Watches, and you'll see collectors having and collecting some of their pieces, and exclusive just their pieces. So I'm a big fan of Longines, and I want to say, given the few brands that I'm talking about here, Longines been doing it longer than the rest in terms of reissues. Second, we're going to be talking about is Breitling. Now, I'll leave a link to a video that I made last year right up there. Go ahead and click it on my 2019 predictions from Breitling, and I did say that I thought that they were going to do a vintage Navitimer reissue. They did go ahead and do that. They did the reissue of the 806 with the syringe style hands, a limited edition piece, very hard to come by, completely sold out, and this was kind of Breitling's step into starting to do reissues. Although I must say the Aviator 8 line done by George Kern, you can very much see him paying homage to some of their vintage pieces of the past. Now, 2020, they've released the 765 AVI, an awesome chronograph, one of the more collectible vintage Breitlings that you can actually get on the market today. Another limited edition piece. And then just a few days ago, they've released a new Breitling Top Time. I love the Top Time. I actually own a Top Time in my collection. Now, the Top Time line, there's many different vintage models in that line. Some are more desirable than others. They decided to go with this piece that's super retro with black, white, and orange on the dial. Very cool. Where I think they missed the mark a little bit is that they introduced this in a 41 millimeter. I really wish they would have introduced this at maybe a 38 or a 39. But you know what? They understand the appeal for vintage watches, but you know what? Most people are still wanting a 40 and above size case, and they don't make their limited edition pieces in a low production. They're usually around 2,000 pieces. So I understand the thought process behind going with a 41 millimeter. Then you go with Omega. Obviously, the Speedmaster has pretty much stayed the same since its first introduction, but now they're doing a recreation of the ever so iconic 321 Ed White edition Speedmaster. So again, we're starting to see this trend with a lot of these big brands starting to understand the collector market and going back to these vintage inspired pieces. We also have the Tudor Black Bay 58 introducing a dive watch under 40 millimeters from a big brand. It's pretty ballsy. What I like about Tudor is they'll basically do the things that Rolex won't do. Rolex plays it too safe at times, and Tudor's kind of like the bad boy brother where you're going to see ceramic watches or diamond-like carbon watches or unique designs like the P01 or even something really cool like a Black Bay 58. Tudor is kind of like the experimental version of Rolex, and that's what I love so much about them. But again, they're also kind of getting on board with that vintage reissue. And newest of all, we have Audemars Piguet dropping that vintage 1940s chronograph. This piece is unbelievable. You can even see one of the originals on a Hodinkee Talking Watches with Alfredo Peramico. This guy's collection is unbelievable. He's only collecting the finest watches that you can find on the vintage market, and obviously this 1940s Audemars Piguet chronograph has to be one of them. He says in the episode that you really didn't see many chronographs coming out of AP from the 1940s, making this one quite special. Audemars Piguet decided to release this in only 500 pieces, which is very few watches now. 500 seems like actually a lot when you think of Audemars Piguet being they produce 40,000 watches per year, but 500 for any other brand would be like a drop in the hat. It wouldn't be much. But I think that this is very smart, because what all these brands are doing with these vintage watches is they understand that the collector market for, you know, watch collectors and vintage guys and the Hodinkee readers and the YouTube watchers of the world for watch content, it's pretty small given the scope of what they're trying to do and what they're trying to sell. Now, what they're doing with these watches is they're putting it out, and then through social media and Instagram and these blogs, and guys like you and I that love these vintage watches, we're talking about it, we're making videos on it, we're posting their pictures, and it becomes free marketing for these companies. And there's not much of a risk there because they're only producing these in 500 pieces. They're not putting it into production saying, you know what, this is gonna be a core range piece, and we're going to be producing 10,000 of these watches a year, and we need to go ahead and do a sellout of these. It's a perfect way of introducing something and seeing how well it does. And you know what? If it's an instant hit and a big sellout, it's almost like a concept, and they'll take bits and pieces of that and introduce it into their current collection. So it's very smart what these companies are doing. But what I go ahead and start thinking is, now, obviously, the AP, the original piece from 1940s, I believe it last sold in auction in 2017 at just under $400,000. That's not in my price range. Maybe that's in your price range, and if it is, congratulations. But what I go ahead and start thinking is, like the Breitling 806, do I want to go ahead and spend $9,000 on a reissue when I can spend $3,000 or $4,000 and have a real piece from the 1960s? Now, this has the tritium falling through the hands. It's finicky. I don't like playing with the chronograph too much because I don't want it to break. You don't know if it's a Franken watch. You have to trust the seller. They don't run as accurate. So there's pros and cons to both, but what do you guys think? Would you rather go with something of the reissue, or would you rather the original piece? Or would you rather just collect vintage watches, and if you're going to buy a modern watch, you want a modern watch? You don't want a reissue. I'd love to know what you guys think down below. Very interesting topic in my opinion, and I do think we're going to start to see a lot of other brands with rich histories like Tag Heuer, Longines, as I mentioned, Breitling. They're going to continue to put out a lot of their vintage pieces and reissue them. Let me know what you guys think down below. Thank you all for subbing. Honestly, I mean, this last few weeks, I can't believe how many subscribers I got. It's really cool and really exciting. Don't forget to give me a sub and follow me on Instagram and shoot me a DM and let me know that you want to be part of the 750 Breitling giveaway. Really excited for that. But like I said, guys, thank you all for watching. I know we obviously have a bit more time to go on YouTube and watch videos to get out of this chaos of what's going on in the real world right now. But I hope you all are doing well, and I hope you all are staying very safe. And I know we're going to get through this soon, guys. But until next time, take care.